The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wider than 3 human football fields. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned seats, some breathing oxygen, others requiring methane atmospheres in their sealed pods. Above them all, the great dome showed the stars beyond, a reminder of the vast universe they all shared. Ambassador David Chen stood at the speaking platform. His dark suit looked plain compared to the colorful robes and shells worn by the other delegates. He was a small figure in this massive room, but his voice carried clearly through the translation systems that converted his words into hundreds of languages. Chen had been humanity's voice in the council for 5 years now. He knew every species represented here. He had shared meals with the Valorans, whose bodies looked like moving crystals. He had debated philosophy with the ancient keepers. Being so old, they remembered when Earth's sun was young. He had even made the Quellan delegates laugh, though their sense of humor was very different from human jokes. Today, however, nobody was laughing. The Krell Dominion had conquered another world. The Palaxians had been a peaceful farming species, living on 3 small planets near the galactic rim. They had no weapons, no armies, no way to defend themselves. The Krell had taken their worlds in less than a week. Reports said millions of Palaxians had died in the invasion. Chen looked across the chamber at the Krell delegation. There were 5 of them, each standing over 8 feet tall. Their scales were dark green, almost black, and their eyes were the color of old blood. High Commander Vrax, their leader, sat in the center. His claws rested on the arms of his seat, like weapons on display. The human ambassador took a slow breath before speaking. He had written his speech carefully, choosing each word with precision. Honored members of the council, Chen began. For 150 years, humanity has been part of this great assembly. We joined you in peace. We came not as conquerors, but as students, eager to learn from species far older and wiser than ourselves. We have kept our promises. We have followed the laws. We have tried to be good neighbors to all. He paused, letting the translation systems catch up. Some delegates nodded their various types of heads. Others remained still watching. The Palaxian massacre cannot stand unanswered. Chen continued, his voice growing harder. This council was founded on principles: peace, justice, protection of the weak. If we allow the Krell Dominion to continue their expansion, then these principles mean nothing. Today, it is the Palaxians. Tomorrow, it could be any of us. High Commander Vra laughed. The sound was like rocks grinding together. He stood up, his massive form casting a shadow across several nearby delegates. The human speaks of war, Vra said. His voice needed no translation system. It boomed through the chamber naturally. How amusing. Tell me, Ambassador Chin, when was the last time your species fought a real battle? How many warships does Earth possess? 100? 200? Vra's smile showed rows of sharp teeth. The Krell Dominion has 12,000 warships. We have conquered 40 systems. Our soldiers are born and bred for combat. They know nothing but victory. And you, little human, dare to threaten us. You, whose greatest military achievement in recent memory was helping to relocate refugees. Some of the younger species in the council chambers made sounds that might have been agreement or amusement. Chen noticed the Uvari delegation nodding to each other. They were a warrior culture themselves, though not as aggressive as the Krell. They respected strength, and clearly found the Krell display impressive. But Chen also noticed something else. The ancient species were very quiet. The keepers watched with their 1,000 eyes. The Valorans had stopped their constant humming. Even the drill, who usually slept through most council sessions, were awake and paying attention. Chen kept his face calm, though his heart was beating fast. Commander Rex, humanity is asking the council to sanction the Krell Dominion for its violations of council law. We are not threatening war. We are requesting justice. Rex walked down from his platform, his claws clicking on the stone floor. He moved until he was standing right in front of Chin, towering over the human ambassador. Justice, Vra repeated. Let me tell you about justice, human. Justice is what the strong take from the weak. The Palaxians were weak. They fell. Now they serve the Dominion. This is the natural order. The Krell commander leaned down, bringing his face close to Chen's. Your species speaks of peace, because you have forgotten how to wage war. You are soft, domesticated. You play at being civilized, because you are too weak to be anything else. The galaxy has moved on, Ambassador. There are new powers rising, and the old rules no longer apply. Frax straightened up and addressed the entire council. The Krill Dominion has noted humanity's extensive colony network. 23 settled worlds, all fat and prosperous. From your precious trade agreements, all undefended, protected only by a handful of patrol ships. It would be unfortunate if something were to happen to them. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted in various languages. Some called for order. Others called for Vrax to be removed. The ancient species remained silent, watching. Chen waited for the noise to die down. When he spoke again, his voice was very quiet, which somehow made everyone listen more carefully. Commander Vra, are you threatening human colonies? I am stating facts, Rex replied. Your colonies are vulnerable. The Dominion is expanding. If humanity's territory happens to be in our path, well, that is simply unfortunate. Unless, of course, Earth would like to formally cede those systems to the Dominion. That would avoid any unpleasantness. A keeper finally spoke its voice like wind through caves. This is most irregular. The Council cannot allow open threats between member species. Brax turned to the keeper. With respect, Ancient One, the Krell Dominion is simply offering humanity a choice. Peace or education in modern warfare. I suspect they will choose peace. They always do. Chen looked around the chamber. He saw fear in many faces. The Krell were strong, and few species wanted to stand against them. The Council was good at talking, but when it came to action, they often did nothing. He had known this meeting might end this way. The human ambassador bowed slightly to the Council. I thank the Council for hearing humanity's concerns. I will relay Commander Vra's ultimatum to Earth. They will provide an answer within 3 days. As Chen walked out of the chamber, he heard Vra laughing behind him. That sound echoed through the halls, followed by the nervous chattering of delegates who didn't want to make the Krell angry. But Chen also noticed something. As he passed the Keeper delegation, one of the ancient beings reached out and gently touched his shoulder. It said nothing, but its many eyes were sad. Back on his ship, Chen sent an encrypted message to Earth. The response came back in 2 hours. It was a single word sent from the Secretary General herself. Declined. Chen sent that word to the Krell Dominion. Then he sent messages to all human colonies using old codes that hadn't been activated in over a century. The code said just 2 words. Come home. Across human space, people began packing. They had drills for this, though nobody alive remembered the last time they had been used. Civilian transport started moving colonists back toward Earth and the core worlds. The process was slow and orderly. Nobody panicked. Humanity had learned over thousands of years how to stay calm in a crisis. 3 days later, Krell warships entered the solar system. There were 75 of them, massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in Earth's defensive fleet. They passed Mars without stopping, ignoring the small colonies there. They had one target in mind: Earth. High Commander Vra stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet grow larger on the view screen. Around Earth, he could see the orbital defense platforms coming online. Weak things, really. The Dominion had encountered stronger defenses on primitive worlds. Open a channel to Earth, Vra ordered. A human face appeared on the screen. An elderly woman in a military uniform, Fleet Admiral Sarah Okonkwo, according to the data files. She looked tired. This is High Commander Var, of the Krell Dominion. You were given a choice. You chose poorly. Now you will learn what happens to those who defy us. Your orbital defenses will be destroyed. Selected population centers will be targeted. This is education, human. Learn well. Admiral Okonkwo said nothing for a long moment. Then she sighed, a sound of deep weariness. You should have listened to the Keepers, she said quietly. They remember. They tried to warn you. Fra laughed. Empty words from a defeated species. Begin the attack. The Krell fleet opened fire. Earth's orbital platforms returned fire, but they were vastly outnumbered. Within an hour, half of them were destroyed. The Krell then turned their weapons toward the planet itself. The first strike hit Paulo. The beam weapons cut through the city's shields and vaporized a section of the downtown area. An estimated 1 million people died in the first 10 seconds. Beijing was next, then New York, then Mumbai. The Krell were efficient and thorough. They broadcast every strike across the galaxy, making sure everyone could see. This was their message to any species that might resist them. This was the price of defiance. In the council chambers, delegates watched in horror. Some wept, others argued for intervention, but the Krell had been careful. They attacked only military and industrial targets according to their definition. By council law, this was technically a legitimate military operation. Brutal, yes. Horrifying, certainly, but legal. The ancient species watched in silence. The keepers had seen this before long ago. They remembered the last time someone had made the humans truly angry. After 6 hours of bombardment, Varax ordered his fleet to withdraw. They had made their point. Earth was wounded, burning, broken. The death toll was estimated at over 2 billion. As the Krell fleet jumped away, High Commander Vrak settled back in his command chair, satisfied. He expected Earth's surrender message to arrive within a day. Instead, 22 hours later, he received a transmission. It was Admiral Okonkwo again. Her face was covered in ash, and there was a bandage on her forehead, but her eyes were clear and cold as ice. Behind her, Vrax could see what looked like an underground bunker. Other humans were visible working at consoles. Some were in military uniforms. Others wore civilian clothes. Commander Vra Okonkwo said, "I have a message from the Secretary General." Vra leaned forward, eager to hear Earth's surrender. Okono held up a data pad and read from it. Her voice was steady without emotion. "You have 24 hours. Run." The transmission ended. Bra stared at the empty screen. Then he started laughing. His officers joined in. The idea that Earth burning and broken was threatening them. It was the funniest thing they had heard in years. 24 hours, Rex repeated, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. What will they do? Throw rocks at us? Send angry messages? But across human space, something was waking up. In the asteroid belts of 100 systems, rocks that had been floating quietly for decades suddenly started moving. Hidden doors opened in their surfaces, revealing spaces large enough to build cities inside. No, not cities, shipyards. And the ships that emerged were nothing like the patrol craft the galaxy knew. These were warships, real warships, ancient designs that predated humanity's entry into the Council. Vessels built when humans had only themselves to fight, when their wars consumed entire planets in deep space, far from any star. Massive objects that had been classified as comets began changing course. They weren't comets. They were colony ships, yes, but not for civilians. These ships had been sleeping for 150 years, waiting. Inside them, in countless cryopods, soldiers dreamed. Now the pods were warming up. The dreams were ending. The soldiers were waking. On Earth, in her underground command center, Admiral Okonkwo opened a safe that had been sealed for longer than she had been alive. Inside was a single folder marked with one word, Rubicon. She read the orders inside, orders written by people long dead, orders that every human military officer was required to memorize, but hoped never to use. When she finished reading, she looked up at her staff. They were waiting, watching her face. "Send the activation code," Okono said quietly. "All of them. Wake everyone up. Bring them all home." One of her officers, a young man who looked barely old enough to be in uniform, raised his hand hesitantly. "Ma'am, if we do this, the galaxy will know. They'll know we've been hiding our real strength all this time. They'll know we lied about our capabilities. They'll be afraid of us again." Okono looked at the young officer. Then she looked at the screen showing images of Earth's burning cities, children being pulled from rubble, hospitals overwhelmed with injured, entire neighborhoods simply gone vaporized by krill weapons. "Good," she said. "Let them be afraid." The first missiles hit Earth's moon at exactly 0400 hours Galactic Standard Time. Not the side facing Earth, but the far side. The dark side that nobody paid much attention to. The explosions were massive, visible from Earth as brief flashes of light against the black lunar surface on the Krell flagship. Alarms started screaming. "Report!" High Commander Vra roared, leaping from his command chair. Around him, his bridge crew scrambled to their stations, their claws clicking frantically on controls. Multiple explosions on the lunar far side. An officer reported. Sensors indicate. Commander, the moon is opening up. There are structures inside it. Massive structures. They're coming online. What do you mean opening up? Fra demanded. The main view screen changed, showing the moon in high detail. As Rex watched, huge sections of the lunar surface lifted away like doors. Beneath them were caverns. Enormous spaces carved into the moon's interior over who knew how many years. And those caverns were full of ships. Hundreds of ships. They began emerging from the moon like hornets from a kicked nest. These weren't the small patrol craft the Krell had seen before. These were warships. Dreadnoughts twice the size of the Krell's largest vessels. Carriers that looked like small cities. Their launch bays already deploying smaller attack craft. Destroyers bristling with weapon systems that the Krell database didn't even recognize. How? Var whispered. Our intelligence said Earth had maybe 200 combat vessels total. There must be 1,000 ships coming out of that moon. Commander, we're detecting more signatures. Another officer reported, his voice shaking. Asteroid belt. They're not asteroids. They're ships, Commander. They were camouflaged as asteroids. They're powering up across the entire system. A tactical display appeared on the view screen. Red dots began appearing throughout the solar system. Not just dozens, not even hundreds, thousands of red dots. Each one representing a ship that had been hiding, waiting, sleeping for over a century. Fra felt something he hadn't experienced in his 30 years of military service. Fear. Cold, gripping fear. Get me Admiral Okonkwo, he ordered. Now, the transmission connected. Okonkwo appeared on the screen. She was still in the underground bunker, but now she wore full battle armor. Behind her, Vrax could see tactical displays showing the entire solar system. Every ship, every weapon, every defense platform. The humans knew exactly where his fleet was. Commander Vrax Okonkwo said calmly, "Your 24 hours are up." "What is this?" Var demanded. "Where did these ships come from? Our intelligence said you were weak. You had no military." Okono's expression didn't change. "We lied. When humanity joined the Galactic Council 150 years ago, we agreed to limit our military forces to defensive vessels only. And we did limit them. We kept just enough patrol ships visible to meet the Council requirements. Everything else we hid." She gestured at something off-screen. "Every major asteroid in every human system has been secretly converted into a shipyard or a military base. We hollowed out our moon and filled it with ships. We built sleeper vessels and sent them to the deep dark between stars full of soldiers and cryosleep. We even converted some of our mining stations into weapons platforms." "Why?" Fra asked. "Why hide all of this?" "Because we wanted peace," Okono said simply. "Humanity fought wars for thousands of years, Commander. We got very, very good at it. Too good. When we joined the Council, we decided to try something different. We decided to put away our weapons and be peaceful. But we're not stupid. We knew that someday someone might force us to remember what we are, what we're capable of. You forced us, Commander. You made us remember." The human fleet was moving now, forming up into attack formations that made Vrax's tactical officers mutter in confusion. These weren't standard Council formations. These were aggressive, predatory arrangements that seemed designed to surround and overwhelm rather than hold positions. "You can still leave," Okono said. "Take your fleet and go. Leave human space and never come back. Do that, and we'll let you live." Fra's pride wouldn't let him retreat. Not from humans. Not from any species. He was Krell. He was a conqueror. He had destroyed civilizations. He would not run from monkeys who had gotten lucky with some hidden ships. "The Krell Dominion does not retreat," he said, forcing confidence into his voice. "You may have more ships than we expected, but we are experienced warriors. You are merchants playing at war. We will teach you the difference." Okono nodded slowly. "Then we'll see you in battle, Commander. Though I should warn you about something. Those legends the Keepers tell about humanity's wars before we joined the Council, they're not legends. They're history, and you're about to experience that history firsthand." The transmission ended. Frax stood on his bridge watching the approaching human fleet on his tactical displays. He had 75 ships. The humans had watched. The computer kept recalculating. 3,000 ships. No, 4,000. The numbers kept climbing as more hidden vessels emerged from their hiding places. But numbers alone didn't win battles. The Krell were warriors born and bred. Let the humans come. They would learn what it meant to face the Dominion in combat. The human fleet didn't wait. They attacked immediately with a speed and aggression that caught the Krell completely off guard. The first wave wasn't even ships. It was missiles. Thousands of missiles launched from beyond visual range, coming in from every direction at once. The Krell point defense systems opened fire, destroying most of them, but some got through, and they weren't normal missiles. When they hit, they didn't explode. Instead, they attached themselves to the Krell hulls and began drilling. "They're boring through our armor," an officer shouted. "They're getting inside the ships." Then the second wave hit. Smaller craft, fighters, and attack ships moving in swarms. They didn't fly in neat formations like Council military doctrine taught. They swarmed like insects, seemingly random, but actually coordinated in ways the Krell computers couldn't predict. They targeted weak points, engine clusters, weapon mounts, sensor arrays, and they were fast, incredibly fast. They would dart in, fire, and be gone before the Krell could target them properly. 3 Krell destroyers exploded in the first 10 minutes of combat. Not disabled, not damaged, completely destroyed, broken into pieces by attacks that seemed to know exactly where to hit for maximum effect. "Withdraw," Vrax ordered. "Pull back to defensive formation." But the humans didn't let them withdraw. They pressed the attack, getting in close where the Krell's heavy weapons couldn't be brought to bear effectively. It was like fighting in a knife fight when you had a sword. The humans were too close, too fast, too aggressive. And then something happened that made Vrax's blood run cold. A human ship, a cruiser that had taken heavy damage, didn't try to escape. Instead, it accelerated directly toward a Krell dreadnought. "What is it doing?" an officer asked. Vram understood. "It's ramming. It's going to ram us." The human cruiser crashed into the Krell dreadnought at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the dark space like a small sun. Debris scattered in all directions, damaging nearby vessels. "They're insane," a Krell officer shouted. "They sacrificed their own ship just to destroy ours." But it wasn't just one ship. 3 more damaged human vessels broke formation and headed toward Krell ships at ramming speed. The Krell tried to destroy them, but the human ships were shielded by their own fleet, protected until they could deliver their killing blows. Fra had studied many species' military tactics. Most of them valued their ships and crews above all else. They would retreat if losses became too high. They would negotiate. They would try to save themselves. The humans weren't doing any of that. They were fighting like they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Every damaged ship became a weapon. Every loss was traded for maximum enemy casualties. They fought with a cold, calculated fury that was more terrifying than any rage. 20 minutes into the battle, the Krell had lost 15 ships. The humans had lost 30, but they had thousands more where those came from. The math was simple and brutal. At this rate, the Krell fleet would be destroyed in under 2 hours. "Full retreat," Vex ordered. "All ships, emergency jump. Get us out of here." The Krell fleet began charging their jump drives, preparing to escape into faster-than-light travel. But the humans had anticipated this. They launched a new type of missile, one that exploded near the Krell ships and released clouds of metallic particles. The particles interfered with the jump drives, preventing them from forming stable wormholes. "We're trapped," an officer reported. "The interference will take at least 30 minutes to clear." 30 minutes. The humans would destroy them all in 30 minutes. Fra opened a communication channel. Not to his fleet, to Earth. "Admiral Okonkwo," he called. Admiral Okonkwo respond. The screen flickered. Okono appeared, still in her battle armor. Behind her, the tactical display showed the battle in real time. The human advantage was overwhelming. "We surrender," Vra said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "The Krell fleet surrenders. Call off your attack." Okona looked at him for a long moment. Her face was hard, emotionless. "No," she said simply. Brax couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What?" "But we surrendered. Council law requires you to accept surrender." "You killed 2 billion of my people," Okono replied, her voice cold as the void of space. You bombed our cities. You murdered civilians. And now you want mercy? She leaned closer to the camera. You wanted to teach us about war, Commander. Here's your lesson. In war, when you start something, you'd better be prepared to finish it. Because your enemy might not stop when you want them to. We'll keep attacking your colonies, Vra threatened. Desperate now. We have forces throughout the galaxy. We'll destroy every human world we can reach. Okono's expression didn't change. Go ahead and try. But know this. Every human world you attack will take 3 of yours. Every civilian you kill will make you pay for 10 times over. You wanted total war, Commander. You're getting it. The transmission ended. The human attack continued with renewed fury. More Krell ships exploded or broke apart under the relentless assault. Some tried to flee on conventional drives, but the human ships were faster. They hunted down every vessel that tried to escape. In the end, Vra's flagship was one of the last 3 Krell ships still functioning. It was surrounded by human vessels. Weapons pointed at it from every direction. The Krell shields were down. The engines were destroyed. They were helpless. A transmission came through. Not from Okonkwo this time, but from a human ship captain. Commander Vrax, I'm Captain Martinez, of the human warship Retribution. I have orders regarding your vessel. You and your crew will be taken into custody. Your ship will be towed back to Earth as evidence of Krell aggression. You will stand trial for war crimes. Vrax said nothing. What was there to say? He had led the Dominion into this disaster. He had thought the humans were weak. He had been catastrophically wrong. However, Captain Martinez continued. Admiral Okonkwo has added one more instruction. She wants to make sure you understand something before we bring you in. The view screen changed. It showed the battle from a distance. All of the destroyed Krell ships, all of the debris floating in space, where proud warships had been just an hour ago. Of the 75 ships Vrax had brought to Earth, only 3 remained intact enough to hold prisoners. This, Captain Martinez said, was not a battle. This was not war. This was not even a fair fight. This was pest control. You came to Earth thinking we were merchants and farmers. You forgot that farmers know how to deal with vermin, and we are very, very good at extermination. The view screen changed again, this time showing images being broadcast across the galaxy. Every species in the Council was watching. They had seen the Krell attack Earth. Now they were seeing what happened when you attacked humanity. The message was clear. The humans were back. The species that had once made the galaxy tremble had returned to war, and they had lost none of their edge in their century and a half of peace. In the Galactic Council chambers, delegates watched in stunned silence. Some were horrified. Others were satisfied, glad to see the Krill brought low. But all of them were recalculating their relationships with humanity. The ancient keepers whispered among themselves. They remembered the old days when humanity had first ventured into space. They remembered the wars, the weapons, the ruthless efficiency with which humans had fought their own kind. They had hoped those days were gone forever. Now they knew better. Humanity hadn't changed. They had simply been waiting, hoping, praying that they would never need to be warriors again. But the Krell had forced their hand, and now the galaxy would remember why long ago the very mention of human warships had been enough to make entire civilizations surrender without a fight. The war had just begun. The Krell called it the Week of Ashes. In 7 days, humanity dismantled 40 military installations across 20 different systems. The attacks came without warning, without mercy, and without pause. Admiral Okonkwo had divided the human fleet into strike groups. Each group had a specific target. Each group had orders that were simple and clear. Destroy all military infrastructure. Capture or eliminate all military personnel. Leave nothing that could be used to wage war. The first target was a Krell shipyard, orbiting a gas giant in the Threxus system. It was one of their largest construction facilities, capable of building 10 warships at a time. The Krell considered it impregnable, protected by a fleet of defense platforms and patrol ships. The human attack began at 0200 hours local time. First came the missiles, thousands of them targeting the defense platforms. Then came the electromagnetic pulse weapons, frying the Krell sensor networks and communication systems. By the time the Krell realized they were under attack, half their defenses were already gone. The human fleet appeared from multiple jump points simultaneously surrounding the shipyard. They didn't demand surrender. They didn't issue warnings. They simply began firing. The shipyard was destroyed in 12 minutes. The Krell defense fleet fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Human tactics were unlike anything they had trained for. The humans didn't fight fair. They used every advantage, every trick, every weapon at their disposal. When it was over, debris from the shipyard and the destroyed Krell ships formed a ring around the gas giant. The human fleet jumped away immediately, heading to their next target. They didn't stay to secure the area. They didn't leave occupation forces. They struck and left, moving too fast for the Krell to mount any organized response. The Krell High Command, operating from their headquarters on Krell's Prime, scrambled to respond. They sent orders to their fleets to gather in defensive positions. They called for reinforcements from their allied species. They prepared for a long war of attrition. But the humans weren't interested in a long war. They had learned over thousands of years of fighting each other that the key to victory was speed and overwhelming force. Don't give the enemy time to adapt. Don't give them time to recover. Hit them again and again until they break. The second day saw attacks on 6 different Krell military bases. The humans used different tactics each time, never repeating the same approach twice. Sometimes they came in fast and loud, overwhelming defenses, with sheer firepower. Other times they came in silent and invisible, using stealth technology the Krell didn't know existed. At the Mordak station, a military training facility, the humans didn't even use ships. They sent boarding parties in small, fast dropships that evaded all the Krell sensors. By the time the Krell realized humans were inside their station, it was too late. The humans had taken control of life support and were venting atmosphere from section after section, forcing the Krell to surrender or suffocate. The Krell commander at Mordak sent a desperate transmission before surrendering. His words were broadcast across the galaxy. They're not fighting like soldiers. They're fighting like predators. They study us. They learn our weaknesses. They adapt faster than we can respond. This isn't war. This is extermination. By the third day, Krell morale was collapsing. Their soldiers had been trained to believe they were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They had been taught that victory was inevitable, that their strength was unmatched. Now they were learning that they were prey. Human psychological warfare was devastating. They broadcast every Krell defeat. They showed images of destroyed ships, captured bases, surrendering soldiers. They made sure every Krell military installation knew what was coming. Fear spread like a virus through the Dominion's forces. Some Krell units began surrendering without a fight. Others deserted entirely, fleeing to neutral space and begging for asylum. The proud warrior culture that had conquered 40 systems was crumbling in less than a week. The Galactic Council convened emergency session after emergency session, trying to find some way to stop the conflict. Ambassador Chen attended these sessions, but he offered no compromises. He simply reported on the human military campaign with cold, precise detail. The Krell wanted war. Chen told the Council, they got war. They will get war until they are no longer capable of threatening any peaceful species ever again. Some delegates protested. The Uvari ambassador, who had previously supported the Krell, stood to speak. Ambassador Chen, humanity is committing atrocities. Your forces are using weapons banned by Council conventions. You're attacking without giving chances for surrender. You're acting like the very monsters you claim to be fighting against. Chen turned to face the Uvari ambassador. His expression was calm, but his eyes were hard as steel. The Krell killed 2 billion humans, he said quietly. 2 billion civilians, men, women, and children who had no weapons, who posed no threat, who were simply living their lives. The Krell bombed our cities without warning, without mercy, without remorse. They broadcast their attack across the galaxy as a show of power. And now you lecture us about atrocities. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegate after delegate. Where were you when Earth burned? Where were your emergency sessions when our children were being vaporized? Where was the Council when we needed justice? You did nothing. You sat here and did nothing because you were afraid. Well, humanity is not afraid, and we will finish what the Krell started. The chamber fell silent. Nobody had a good answer to that. On the 5th day, human forces reached the Krell core worlds. These were their most heavily defended systems, where the majority of the Dominion's military strength was concentrated. The Krell had pulled back their remaining fleets to these systems, creating layered defenses that should have been impossible to break through. The humans broke through anyway. They used tactics that shocked even the ancient species watching. At the Vraise system, humans detonated a series of gravity bombs that temporarily destabilized the local star. The resulting solar flares destroyed an entire Krell defense fleet. At the Kelroth system, humans used nano-machine clouds that ate through ship hulls like acid, turning proud warships into Swiss cheese in minutes. And at the Thraxar system, humans demonstrated a weapon that made the entire galaxy shudder. They called it a stellar lance. It used focused antimatter beams to punch through any defense, any shield, any armor. The Krell tried to hide their command ships behind planets. The humans shot through the planets. A keeper spoke in the council chambers, its ancient voice filled with sorrow. We warned you. We tried to tell you about the humans, about what they are capable of when pushed. You would not listen. You thought the old stories were exaggerated. You thought a century of peace had made them soft. You were wrong. Another keeper added, the humans are not cruel by nature. They are not evil, but they are efficient. When they fight to win. They don't understand half measures. They don't understand honor and defeat. They understand only victory or death. And they are very, very good at choosing victory. By the 6th day, the Krell were in full retreat. Their military was shattered. Their industrial capacity was gone. Their pride was broken. But the humans weren't done. Human intelligence had located the Krell Supreme Council, the ruling body that had ordered the attack on Earth. They were hiding in a bunker deep beneath the surface of Krell's prime, thinking themselves safe behind layers of rock and defense systems. The humans sent a single message to the Supreme Council. You have two choices. Surrender unconditionally, or we turn your world into a tomb. You have 1 hour to decide. The Krell Supreme Council debated. Some wanted to fight to the end. Others argued for surrender. In the end, they asked for terms, for negotiations, for some way to save face. The humans sent back a single word, no. With 30 minutes left on the ultimatum, the Krell Supreme Council surrendered unconditionally, completely. They transmitted codes that would order every Krell military unit to stand down. They opened their bunker doors and walked out with their hands raised in submission. Human Marines took them into custody without incident. They were loaded onto transport ships and taken to Earth where they would stand trial for war crimes. The war was effectively over. It had lasted 7 days. The Krell Dominion, which had taken decades to build, which had conquered 40 systems, which had been considered one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, had been completely defeated in 1 week. But the humans weren't celebrating. They were too busy counting their own dead. The war had cost humanity dearly. 2 billion dead in the initial attack. Thousands more killed in the fighting that followed. Earth's surface was scarred with craters where cities had stood. The survivors were homeless, traumatized, grieving. Admiral Okonkwo addressed the human fleet from her command center on Earth. The transmission was broadcast to every human ship, every human colony, and by request to the Galactic Council. We have won, she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. The KRL are defeated. Their military is destroyed. Their leadership is in custody. Justice will be served. She paused, looking directly at the camera. But victory tastes like ashes in our mouths. We did not want this war. We tried for 150 years to be peaceful, to be good neighbors, to show that strength could be tempered with mercy. The Krell forced us to remember what we are, what we're capable of. They made us become warriors again. Behind her, the screens showed images of Earth's ruined cities, of memorial services for the dead, of survivors searching through rubble for loved ones who would never be found. We are not proud of what we had to do, Okono continued. We are not happy about the weapons we used, the tactics we employed, the deaths we caused. But we did what was necessary. We protected our species. We ensured that no one will ever again think they can attack humanity without consequences. She stood straighter, her military bearing returning. Now comes the hard part. We must rebuild. We must heal. We must decide what kind of species we want to be. Do we return to peace knowing that it might leave us vulnerable again? Or do we remain warriors, always ready for the next threat? I don't have that answer yet, she admitted. But I know this. The galaxy has been reminded of what humanity is capable of. We have shown that peace is not weakness. We have shown that mercy is a choice we make, not a sign of inability. And we have shown that if you force us to war, we will prosecute that war, with every tool at our disposal, until victory is absolute. The transmission ended with an image that would become famous throughout the galaxy. A human child, no more than 6 years old, standing in the ruins of what had been her home, holding a small flower that had somehow survived the bombardment. She was planting it in the scorched earth, a symbol of hope, of renewal, of humanity's refusal to give up. In the Galactic Council chambers, delegates watched in silence. The mood had changed. Where before there had been fear and horror, now there was something else. Respect, understanding, and yes, still some fear. But it was a different kind of fear. The fear you felt for a sleeping giant, knowing that it could wake again if provoked. Ambassador Chen stood and addressed the council. The Krell leadership will stand trial for their crimes against humanity. They will face justice, but humanity is not interested in revenge. We are not interested in conquest. We never were. We only want peace. He looked around the chamber. However, let this be a lesson to all species here. Humanity's peace is a gift we give freely to those who respect it. But if you force us to remember what we are, if you make us become warriors again, we will not stop until the threat is eliminated completely. We are patient. We are merciful. But we are not weak. Never mistake our kindness for weakness. The message was received. Across the galaxy, species that had been considering aggressive expansion quietly shelved their plans. Alliances that had been forming against various neighbors suddenly dissolved. Pirates and raiders, who operated in human space, found new hunting grounds far, far away. The ancient species watched all of this with knowing expressions. They had seen it before long ago. The galaxy had learned once before to fear human warships. That lesson had faded with time. Now it had been taught again in blood and fire. But the question remained, what would humanity do now? Would they return to peace? Or would they remain mobilized, always ready for war? The answer would determine the future of the galaxy. The trials began 3 weeks after the war ended. The Krell Supreme Council, High Commander Vrax, and 200 other senior military officers were brought before an international tribunal on Earth. The location was significant. The courtroom had been built in what used to be the center of Ces Paulo, the first city the Krell had attacked. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy. Every species could watch as the Krell leadership stood accused of war crimes, crimes against sentient species, and illegal warfare. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings of the attack, casualty reports, testimonies from survivors who described the horror of watching their cities burn. High Commander Vra sat in the defendant's chair, his scales dull and his eyes empty. He had been a proud warrior once, confident in his superiority. Now he looked broken, defeated, not just militarily, but spiritually. He listened as witness after witness described the devastation the Krell had caused. A human woman took the stand. Her name was Maria Santos. She had lived in Silo with her husband and 2 children. When the Krell attacked, she had been at work. Her family had been at home. She described rushing back, finding nothing but a crater where her house had stood. She described searching through the rubble for days, hoping against hope. She described the moment she realized her entire family was gone, vaporized in an instant. When she finished testifying, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even some of the Krell guards looked uncomfortable. Brax's defense attorney, assigned by human law, tried to argue that the attack had been a legitimate military operation, that the Krell had targeted only strategic locations, that the civilian deaths were unfortunate but unavoidable collateral damage. The prosecution showed footage of Rex's own communications. His orders had specifically mentioned civilian targets. He had wanted to break humanity's spirit by attacking population centers. He had broadcast the attack as entertainment, as a display of Krell power. There was no military justification. It had been terrorism, pure and simple. The tribunal's verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. High Commander Vrax and the entire Krell Supreme Council were sentenced to life imprisonment. They would spend the rest of their lives in human custody, serving as a reminder of what happens when you attack innocents. Some humans wanted execution. They wanted the Krell leadership to pay with their lives for the billions they had killed. But the tribunal decided otherwise. Death would be too easy, too quick. Let them live with what they had done. Let them watch as humanity rebuilt. As the species they had tried to break grew stronger, let them see that they had failed. While the trials proceeded, the real work began, rebuilding. The damage to Earth was catastrophic. Entire cities needed to be reconstructed. Millions of people were homeless. The economic disruption was severe. But humanity had been through worse before. They had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and climate disasters. They would survive this too. Help came from unexpected sources. The Valorans, those beings of living crystal, sent construction materials. The Keepers shared ancient knowledge about rapid urban reconstruction. Even the Quellan, who rarely involved themselves in galactic politics, sent food and medical supplies, and the Krems themselves were put to work. As part of the peace treaty, they were required to provide reparations. Krell workers were assigned to help rebuild the cities they had destroyed. They worked under human supervision, using their considerable strength to clear rubble and construct new buildings. At first, there was tension. Human survivors wanted nothing to do with the Krell. Some called for the Krell workers to be sent away, to be punished more severely. But gradually, something unexpected happened. The Krell workers were mostly young soldiers who had been conscripted into service. They had been taught all their lives that war was glorious, that conquest was honorable, that strength was everything. Now they saw the reality of what their leaders had done. They saw the children who had lost parents. They saw the elderly trying to rebuild homes they had lived in for decades. They saw the true cost of war. One Krell worker, a young male named Threx, was assigned to help rebuild a school in what had been Mumbai. He worked alongside human volunteers, hauling materials and following instructions. At first, nobody talked to him. He was the enemy after all. But one day, a human child approached him. A little girl, maybe 7 years old. She stared up at him with wide eyes. "Are you the bad guys?" she asked. Thrax didn't know how to answer. In his language, he said, "I don't know anymore." The girl's mother came and took her away quickly. But the question haunted Threx. He had been taught that the Krell were superior, that their conquests were justified, that might made right. But here he was, helping to repair damage his people had caused, seeing firsthand the suffering they had inflicted. He wasn't the only one having such thoughts. Across Earth and the human colonies, Krell workers were questioning everything they had been taught. Some became defiant, clinging to their old beliefs. But many more began to change, to understand that their culture's glorification of warfare had led them to this defeat. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council, debates raged about what to do with the Krell Dominion. The Krell military had been dismantled. Their government was gone, replaced by a provisional administration overseen by the Council. But what about the Krell people themselves? There were billions of them spread across dozens of worlds. Some species called for harsh measures, restricted citizenship, limited rights, permanent monitoring to prevent them from ever rebuilding their military. The Uvari, embarrassed by their earlier support of the Krell, were particularly vocal about punishment. Ambassador Chen surprised everyone by opposing these measures. "The Krell people are not our enemies," he said in a council session. "Their leaders were our enemies. Their military culture was our enemy. But the ordinary Krell citizen who never wanted war, who never chose to attack anyone, they don't deserve collective punishment." The Uvari ambassador challenged him. "How can you say this, Ambassador Chen? After what they did to your world, to your people, how can you show them mercy?" Chen's expression was sad but resolute, because mercy is what separates us from them. The Krell leadership showed no mercy. They attacked civilians without hesitation. If we become like them, if we punish innocent people for the crimes of their leaders, then what did we fight for? Justice or revenge? He looked around the chamber. Humanity has learned through bitter experience that cycles of revenge never end. If we crush the Krell now, if we humiliate them and strip them of dignity, We'll just create a new generation that grows up hating us, that wants revenge, that might one day try again. But if we show them that there's a better way, if we help them rebuild into something better than what they were, then maybe, just maybe, we can break that cycle. The council voted on Chen's proposal. It passed, though not unanimously. The Krell would be allowed to rebuild their civilization, but under strict conditions. No military beyond basic defense forces, mandatory education about the costs of warfare, regular inspections to ensure compliance, and most importantly, full integration into the galactic community, not as conquerors, but as equals who had learned from their mistakes. Not everyone on Earth was happy with this decision. Many humans felt that the Krell deserved harsher punishment. Protests broke out in several cities. Survivors of the attacks organized demonstrations, demanding that the Krell be made to suffer as humanity had suffered. Admiral Okono addressed these concerns in a public broadcast. "I understand your anger," she said. "I share it. I lost friends in the attack. I lost colleagues, people I had worked with for years. Every day I see the scars on our world, and I feel that same rage you feel." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But we have a choice to make. We can let that anger consume us. We can spend the next century punishing the Krell, making sure they never forget what they did, and in doing so, we'll become the monsters we fought against. Or we can choose to be better. We can show the galaxy that humanity's strength isn't just in our weapons, but in our ability to forgive without forgetting, to seek justice without vengeance." She pointed at the camera, speaking directly to every human watching. "The Krell made us remember what we're capable of in war. Now, let's remind the galaxy what we're capable of in peace. Let's show them that we can win the war and still choose mercy. That's true strength. That's what will make humanity respected, not just feared." The protest didn't stop immediately, but they grew smaller. Most humans, exhausted by war and grief, just wanted to move forward. They wanted to rebuild their lives, to heal, to find some way back to normal. And slowly, things did start to return to normal. New buildings rose where old ones had fallen. Families moved into new homes. Children went back to school. Life, persistent and stubborn, continued. The relationship between humans and Krill remained complicated. There was still distrust, still pain, still anger. But there were also small moments of connection. A Krill worker sharing his lunch with a human colleague. A human teacher helping a young Krell learn to read. These were tiny steps, barely noticeable in the grand scheme of things, but they were steps forward nonetheless. 3 months after the war ended, something happened that captured the galaxy's attention. The young Krell worker, Threx, had continued working on the school reconstruction project in Mumbai. He had become known among the human workers as someone who worked hard and asked a lot of questions about human culture. One day, a ceremony was held to mark the completion of the school's main building. Human and Krell workers were both invited. Most of the Krell stayed in the background, uncomfortable with the attention. But Threx did something unexpected. He walked up to the memorial wall that had been built to honor those who had died in the attack. It listed thousands of names, including many children who would have attended this school. Threx knelt before the wall, a gesture that in Krell culture signified deep respect and submission. Then he spoke in halting but clear human language. "I am Threz of the Krell. I was a soldier. I was taught that war was glory. I was taught that strength was everything. I was wrong. My people were wrong. We caused this pain. We destroyed these lives. No words can undo that. No work can bring back those who were lost. But I promise, on behalf of all young Krell who wish for a better future, we will remember. We will learn. We will never forget what our pride cost the galaxy." The ceremony went silent. Humans stared at this young Krell kneeling before their memorial. Some were angry, thinking it was too little, too late. Others were moved, seeing genuine remorse in his actions. Then an elderly woman stepped forward. Her name was Priya Singh. She had lost her daughter and 3 grandchildren in the attack. She walked up to Threx, and for a moment just looked down at him. "Stand up," she said quietly. Threx stood, his eyes downcast, expecting anger or rejection. "You did not kill my family," Priya said. "Your leaders did. Your culture of war did. But you are here, trying to make it right. That takes courage. More courage than swinging a weapon. She reached out and hesitantly placed her hand on his arm. Help us build a future where no grandmother loses her grandchildren to war. Can you do that? Threx's voice was thick with emotion. I will try. I will spend my life trying. The image of that moment, a human elder and a young Krell standing together before a memorial to war's victims, was broadcast across the galaxy. It became a symbol of something that many had thought impossible: reconciliation. Not forgetting, not excusing, but finding a way forward despite the pain. In the Galactic Council chambers, even the most cynical delegates had to admit they were witnessing something remarkable. Humanity, which had demonstrated such devastating military capability, was now showing equal capability for mercy and forgiveness. They were teaching the galaxy a different kind of lesson. That strength wasn't just about how hard you could hit, but about what you chose to do after the fighting stopped. The ancient keepers observed all of this with satisfaction. They had seen many civilizations rise and fall. They had watched countless species make the same mistakes over and over. But humanity, with all its flaws and contradictions, was showing signs of something rare. True wisdom, the ability to be both strong and merciful, to remember the past without being enslaved by it. One keeper spoke to its companions, its ancient voice thoughtful. Perhaps there is hope for this galaxy after all. If the humans can find their way through this darkness, if they can balance power with compassion, then they may be the ones to lead us into a better age. Another keeper agreed. They were always capable of greatness, both terrible and beautiful. The question was whether they would choose wisely. So far, they are choosing well, but the path forward was not easy. Humanity still had to decide what to do with its military. The hidden fleets were no longer hidden. The galaxy knew humanity's true strength now. Should they maintain that strength? Or should they try to return to the peaceful ways they had embraced for 150 years? That question would be answered in the months to come. For now, humanity was focused on healing, on rebuilding, on finding a way to live with the memories of what they had lost and what they had done. The galaxy watched and waited, knowing that whatever humanity decided, it would shape the future of all species for generations to come. 6 months after the war ended, the human government called for a referendum. Every human citizen on Earth and in the colonies would vote on a single question. What should humanity do with its military? The options were simple: return to the old ways, hiding most of the military and presenting a peaceful face to the galaxy, or maintain full military readiness, keeping the fleets visible and operational as a permanent deterrent to aggression. The debate that followed was intense. Those who favored maintaining the military argued that the galaxy had proven itself dangerous. The Krill had attacked because they thought humans were weak. If humanity returned to hiding their strength, someone else might make the same mistake. Those who wanted to return to peace argued that maintaining a large military would change humanity forever. It would make them the thing they had fought to avoid becoming. Warriors first, everything else second. They argued that 150 years of peace had been good for humanity, had allowed them to grow culturally and scientifically in ways that constant military readiness never would have permitted. Admiral Okonkwo spoke in favor of maintaining the military. She stood before cameras broadcasting to every human world and made her case. We tried peace, she said. We tried to show the galaxy that we were different, that we had evolved beyond our violent past. And what happened? The moment someone thought we were weak, they attacked. 2 billion of our people died because we chose to hide our strength. She looked directly at the camera. I'm not saying we should become conquerors. I'm not saying we should be aggressive, but we should be honest about what we are. We should let the galaxy see our full strength, so that no one ever again makes the mistake of thinking humanity is an easy target. Peace through strength. That's what I'm proposing. The next day, a civilian scientist named Dr. James Chen, no relation to the ambassador, gave the counter-argument. Admiral Okonkwo is right that we need to protect ourselves, he acknowledged. But there's a difference between protection and intimidation. If we maintain this massive military presence, we become the thing every other species fears. We become the potential threat, the species that everyone else has to worry about. He gestured at images behind him, showing human ships in formation, weapons bristling. These ships represent incredible scientific and engineering achievement. But they also represent resources that could be used for research, for exploration, for making life better for everyone. Every credit we spend on maintaining a war machine is a credit not spent on medicine, education, art, culture. Yes, we need to be able to defend ourselves, Dr. Chen continued. But do we need thousands of warships on permanent patrol? Or can we return to our previous approach, keeping the bulk of our military in reserve, ready to activate if needed, but not consuming our resources and attention during peacetime? The debates went on for weeks. Town halls were held on every colony world. People argued in cafes, in workplaces, in their homes. It was the most significant decision humanity had faced in generations. Ambassador Chen, representing humanity in the Galactic Council, had a unique perspective. He saw how other species reacted to human military power. Some were relieved, grateful that there was now a force capable of standing up to aggressive empires. Others were nervous, uncertain what humanity might do with all that power. A keeper approached him privately one day, after a council session. "What will your people choose?" the ancient being asked, its many eyes studying him. Chen shook his head. "I honestly don't know. We're divided. Some want to never again be caught unprepared. Others want to return to who we were trying to be. Both sides have good arguments." The keeper made a sound like wind through ancient trees. There is wisdom in both positions. But perhaps the most important question is not what you choose, but why you choose it. Are you choosing out of fear, or are you choosing based on who you want to be? Chen thought about that conversation as he watched the referendum results come in. The voting lasted a full day, with billions of humans participating. When the results were tallied, they surprised almost everyone. Humanity chose a middle path. They would not return to completely hiding their military. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of, and that knowledge couldn't be taken back. But neither would they maintain full military mobilization. Instead, they would keep a visible defense fleet large enough to deter aggression, but not so large as to be threatening. The rest of the military would return to reserve status, ready to be activated if needed, but not consuming peace prime resources. More importantly, humanity voted to establish new protocols. If humanity ever had to fully mobilize again, it would only be in response to direct attack, or in defense of council members unable to defend themselves. They would never be the aggressor. They would never strike first. Their strength would be purely defensive. The Secretary General of Earth, an elderly woman named Margaret Endeavoux, announced the decision to the galaxy in a historic address. "Humanity has made its choice," she said, her voice strong despite her age. "We will remain capable of defending ourselves and others, but we will not become a warrior species. We will not let fear dictate our future. We choose peace, but it is an informed peace, a realistic peace. We know the galaxy can be dangerous. We are prepared for that danger, but we refuse to let danger define us." She paused, looking directly at the camera. "To all species watching, we say this. Humanity's strength is not a threat to peaceful civilizations. We have no desire to conquer, to dominate, to impose our will on others. But we will protect ourselves. We will protect our allies, and we will stand against aggression wherever we find it. To those who might consider attacking humanity or our friends, we offer this reminder. We are the species that turned planets into battlefields. We are the species that weaponized stars. We are the species that has fought itself for thousands of years and survived. We choose peace, not because we cannot wage war, but because we understand war's true cost. Do not mistake our choice for inability. Do not confuse our mercy with weakness." The speech ended with an image that would become iconic, a memorial on Earth, simple and stark. It showed a human child holding hands with a Krell child, both looking up at a sky full of stars. Beneath it was an inscription in every galactic language. "Humanity chooses peace. We choose it every day, knowing what the alternative costs. We are prepared for war, but we dream of harmony. We can destroy worlds, but we prefer to build them. This is our nature. Remember it." The response from the galaxy was mixed, but mostly positive. Species that had feared human aggression relaxed, reassured by humanity's self-imposed limits. Those that had hoped for a strong protector felt confident that humanity would respond if needed. The message was clear. Humanity was strong, but that strength was leashed by choice, not by inability. In the months that followed, humanity began returning to its pre-war activities. Scientists resumed research projects. Artists created new works inspired by the trauma and triumph of the recent conflict. Families rebuilt their lives. The scars remained, physical and emotional. But life went on. The Krell, meanwhile, were undergoing their own transformation. Their warrior culture was being dismantled, not by force, but by choice. Young Krell, like Threx who had seen the reality of war's consequences, were leading a cultural revolution. They were teaching their people that strength could be measured in ways other than combat prowess. That building could be as honorable as destroying. That peace required more courage than war. It would take generations for the Krell to fully change. Old beliefs died hard. But the process had begun, and it was irreversible. The Krell had learned the hard way that their path led only to ruin. Now they were trying to find a new path. 5 years after the war, something remarkable happened. The first graduating class of the rebuilt Mumbai school held their ceremony. Among the students were 3 young Krell, whose families had moved to Earth as part of the reconciliation program. They studied alongside human children, learning human history, human culture, human values. When the Krell students received their diplomas, they were greeted with applause from human families. Not everyone was happy about this. There were still those who couldn't forgive, who couldn't accept Krell presence on Earth. But they were becoming a minority. Most humans had chosen to move forward, to try to build something better from the ashes of war. Ambassador Chen attended the ceremony. He sat in the audience next to Priya Singh, the grandmother who had lost her family in the attack. Together, they watched as young Krell and humans celebrated their achievements together. "Would your daughter have approved of this?" Chen asked quietly, knowing it was a sensitive question. Priya was silent for a long moment. "I don't know," she finally said. "Maybe." She always believed in second chances. She used to say that children shouldn't have to pay for their parents' mistakes. She gestured at the Krell students on stage. "Those children didn't attack us. They were born into a culture that glorified war. But they're learning different values now. If we can't offer them a chance to be better than their ancestors, then what was the point of any of this?" Chen nodded. "That's what humanity decided, isn't it? That we would be better than our worst impulses. That we would choose who we want to be, rather than letting fear or anger choose for us." 10 years after the war, the galactic situation had stabilized. Other aggressive species, having seen what happened to the Krell, had reconsidered their expansion plans. Pirates and raiders gave human space a wide berth. Even the most warlike cultures began to understand that there were lines you didn't cross, and attacking civilians was one of them. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy had changed fundamentally. They were no longer seen as naive peacekeepers or harmless merchants, but neither were they seen as monsters or conquerors. Instead, they occupied a unique position. They were the species you could trust to keep their word, who would help if you were in trouble, who would trade fairly and honestly. But they were also the species you absolutely did not want to fight, because they would not stop until you were no longer a threat. A new saying spread through the galaxy, repeated in hundreds of languages. Humanity sleeps, but never forgets how to wake. The Keepers, those ancient witnesses to galactic history, discussed humanity's evolution among themselves. "They have achieved something rare," one Keeper observed. "They have balanced strength with wisdom, capability with restraint. They are dangerous, but not threatening, powerful, but not aggressive. This is the mark of a truly mature civilization," another Keeper agreed. They were tested. They could have become tyrants, using their military superiority to dominate, or they could have retreated into isolation, too traumatized to engage with the galaxy. Instead, they chose to remain engaged, to maintain their strength, but use it responsibly. This speaks well of their future. A third Keeper, the oldest among them, added a note of caution. "Let us hope they maintain this wisdom. Power is a burden that grows heavier with time. Many species have started well only to be corrupted by their own strength." Humanity must constantly choose who they want to be. That choice is never finished. It must be made again and again, generation after generation. Back on Earth in the rebuilt city of São Paulo, a monument stood where the first Krell strike had hit. It was a towering structure, visible from kilometers away. At its base were the names of all who had died in the attack. Millions of names carved in stone, a reminder of what had been lost. But at the top of the monument was something different, a beacon shining out into space, visible to any ship approaching Earth. It pulsed with a simple pattern, a message repeated endlessly in light. The message said, "We remember, we forgive, we remain ready." Those 6 words captured humanity's philosophy perfectly. They had not forgotten what the Krell did. They had not forgotten their own dead. But they had chosen not to let hatred consume them. They had chosen to build a future rather than dwelling on the past. And yet they remained vigilant, prepared, ready to defend themselves and others if the need arose again. Admiral Okonkwo, now retired, visited the monument on the anniversary of the attack every year. She would stand there for hours reading names, remembering faces. She had led humanity through its darkest hour and brought them to victory. But the cost of that victory haunted her. On the 10th anniversary, she was approached by a young woman. It took Okonkwo a moment to recognize her. It was the child from the famous photograph, the one who had been planting a flower in the ruins. She was 16 now, studying engineering at university. "Admiral," the girl said, "I wanted to thank you for what you did, for protecting us." Okono shook her head. "I just did my duty." "Nothing special." The girl smiled. "Maybe. But you also made sure that when it was over, we didn't become monsters. You could have kept going. You could have destroyed the Krell completely. A lot of people wanted you to, but you stopped when the fighting was done. You showed mercy. That took more courage than winning the war." Okonkwo felt tears in her eyes. "I hope we made the right choice." "You did," the girl said with certainty. "Because of what you did, I don't have to live in fear. I don't have to grow up in a galaxy where humans are hated or feared. I can have Krill friends. I can visit other species' worlds. I can dream of exploring the galaxy and know that humanity's name will open doors instead of closing them. You gave me that future, Admiral. Thank you." As the girl walked away, Okono looked up at the monument's beacon, pulsing its message into the void. She thought about all the decisions she had made, all the orders she had given. She had unleashed humanity's full military might, had prosecuted a war with ruthless efficiency. But she had also known when to stop. She had chosen victory without genocide, justice without vengeance. Maybe that was humanity's real strength. Not the weapons they could build or the wars they could win, but the choices they made about when and how to use that strength. The ability to be both the sleeping giant and the gentle friend. The species that could wage total war and then extend a hand in peace. In the Galactic Council, new species were being admitted to membership. They all heard the same orientation, the same warnings about respecting Council law and protecting weaker members. But there was one new addition to the orientation, a historical case study that all new members had to review. It was the story of the Krell War, how the Dominion had attacked Earth, thinking humanity was weak, how they had learned their mistake, how humanity had responded with overwhelming force, but had stopped short of genocide, how both species had eventually found a path toward reconciliation. The case study ended with a simple lesson. Never mistake another species' choice for peace as a sign of weakness. Many species are capable of terrible violence. The truly wise ones choose not to exercise that capability unless absolutely necessary. Humanity was that wise. 50 years after the war, the last of the Krell who had participated in the attack on Earth died of old age. The next generation had grown up in a different Krell culture, one that valued cooperation over conquest, building over destroying. They looked back at their ancestors' actions with shame and confusion. How could anyone have thought that attacking innocent civilians was acceptable? How could their culture have glorified such brutality? But the older Krell, those who remembered the old ways, understood. They tried to explain to the younger generation that culture was powerful, that what you were taught from birth shaped how you saw the world. They had been taught that strength was everything, that weakness was contemptible, that conquest was glorious. It had taken the devastating defeat and humanity's measured response to show them a different way. Threx, now middle-aged and respected as a bridge between human and Krell cultures, spoke at universities across both species' worlds. He told his story, how he had been a soldier, how he had seen the results of his culture's aggression, how he had learned a better way. Humanity gave us a gift, he would tell his audiences. Not mercy, though they showed us that. Not forgiveness, though they offered us that too. The gift was the chance to change. They could have destroyed us completely. They had the power. They had the justification. But they chose to give us the opportunity to become better than we were. That is true strength. That is what made humanity feared. Not their weapons, but their wisdom. 100 years after the war, the events had passed into history. Children learned about it in school, the way previous generations had learned about ancient Earth wars, or the first contact with alien species. It was history, important but distant. But the lessons remained. Humanity maintained its defensive fleet, visible and capable. The hidden reserves remained hidden, sleeping but ready. And every human child learned the story of how their species had faced extinction and survived, how they had been provoked into war and had won without losing their soul. The galaxy had changed. There was peace, not perfect, but real. Species cooperated more than they competed. Aggressive empires thought twice before expanding. The Galactic Council actually functioned, actually prevented conflicts instead of just talking about them. And if someone asked why, if they wondered what had caused this golden age of cooperation, the answer was simple. Everyone remembered what happened when you forced humanity to remember what they were capable of. Everyone understood that beneath the friendly merchants and peaceful scientists was something ancient and dangerous. A species that had fought its way to the top of its own world's food chain and had never forgotten how humanity slept. But the galaxy never forgot that they could wake. And in that knowledge, in that careful balance of power and restraint, the galaxy found peace.